Hey, good morning, college football fans. We're going to take a look at week 4 and see how the AP Top 25 did and overlay my resume rankings that I discussed with you last week. Let's dig right in. There's a lot to talk about. All right, let's start off with number 1, Georgia. They did what they needed to do. They took care of Kent State. They met my criteria of winning by more than 2 possessions. But here's the problem with playing some of these smaller FBS and FCS schools. How did Kent State score 22 points against them? I'm not really sure. But I will say when I look at my resume ranking, the point system for them continues to go up. So congratulations. I'll keep watching this one, but I still think this was a waste of a game. Alabama took care of Vanderbilt by 52 points. I'd say that's a great start to the SEC, to their SEC play. And Ohio State took care of Wisconsin by 31 points. Another great start to the Big Ten. Although I'll say the resume ranking point system isn't really working for them yet. They still just have not played quality opponents yet. Michigan, I'm continuing to be disappointed with them. And to be quite honest, my doubts are rising. Their resume ranking has got a point of 47.5, and they only beat Maryland by 7. All the guys on ESPN were hyping this game that this would be competition. I don't know if it's competition, then let's get Maryland ranked. I just don't see it. And they only won by a possession. Frankly, I think they should have won by more than that. Clemson, I got to say, I was extremely disappointed. I watched the majority of this game. A double overtime victory over Wake Forest. Granted, Wake Forest was ranked 22nd, but I mean, we're talking top 5 versus bottom 5 of the top 25. They did play away, so I'll give Clemson that nod. I just felt like this was a game that Wake Forest, after the first 6 minutes of the first quarter, pretty much ran the game, and Clemson was playing catch up. Now, I will say the first few minutes there, I thought Clemson was going to run away with it. So, be that as it may be, the Clemson resume ranking is going up, so that's good as well. Let's keep watching that. USC beating Oregon State by 3, even though it was in Corvallis. Come on, that was way too close. There should be some. They should have moved down in the poll, not up. Same thing with Kentucky. They only won by 8 over Northern Illinois. They should have moved down. That Tennessee Florida game, what a great game. I don't think Florida should be penalized, and Tennessee definitely should move up in the rankings. So I'm happy to see this. Oklahoma State with the bye. North Carolina State, Lee Corso said on ESPN Game Day, he thought these guys were overranked. I think so when I go look at my resume rankings. A 47.5. They just haven't played any competitive competition yet. And so we'll have to wait and see. Not much to say about Penn State beating Central Michigan. I'd say that's probably about the way it should have worked out. Maybe they should have won by more. Who knows? Utah beating Arizona State. I got to go to this game. I'll share some clips with you from my camera, but it wasn't close. Utah took the lead early on, and Arizona State's, I think, best play was a couple of kick returns. That's about it. Oregon playing Washington State. Again, way too close. Oregon should be penalized for this. Matter of fact, Washington State should make their way into the top 25, if you ask me. So, wow, a lot to unpack there. Let's look at the second half of the table. All right, looking at the bottom half of the table with Ole Miss uh, barely winning over Tulsa. Really, I think they should have won that by at least 2 possessions. Um, we'll see how well they continue to play. Washington took care of Stanford. Same comment with Baylor that I would have with Ole Miss. I really think they should have won by at least 2 possessions. So keep watching them. I gave them a little more neutral score, mainly because I give probably Iowa State a little bit more respect in this category. Texas A&M, I swear the Aggies have 2 different teams. So congratulations, you got a great win over Arkansas. Let's see which team continues to show up. The one that can beat top 10 opponents or the one that loses to unranked teams. Oklahoma dropping by 12 points after their loss to Kansas State. That's probably about right. I'd probably prefer to see them drop a few more. But that's probably just my own little bias coming out against Oklahoma in general. BYU playing Wyoming. Uh, I don't know. This game felt like it was closer than what the 14-point margin of victory said. I didn't get to see the game. I was watching the scores from Sun Devil Stadium. It really didn't seem like BYU put them away early. Really not till late in the second half. I don't know. I guess we'll keep watching it. They met my criteria to win by 2 possessions. So, we'll let that play. Arkansas dropping by 10. Yeah, that's probably about right. Like I said, I don't think we really know who Texas A&M is here yet. They might be really good on some days, and they seem to be able to lose to others on other days. Minnesota coming into the rankings sounds good to me. I think we should watch out for them. Wake Forest. I really think Wake Forest, even though they lost, should have moved up in the AP a little bit more. Here's my point. Ask yourself this question. In a double overtime loss to Clemson, who's rated number 5, these teams basically played even for the majority of the game. Now, granted, the first 6-7 minutes, Clemson took off, looked like they were going to run away with it. But after that, Wake Forest really felt like they had the game in control, worked their way back, and led for a good chunk of it as Clemson had to provide some heroics to get it into overtime. So here's my question: did Wake Forest play more like a number 5 team to force that overtime, or did Clemson play more like a number 22 team to force that tie? You know, I frankly think they should be meeting somewhere in the middle. I guess my preference would have been Clemson to fall to like 8 or 9, Wake Forest to climb maybe to 16, 17, somewhere in there. Probably they each come down 4 or 5, go up 4 or 5. I just think they're showing an incredible amount of bias and stickiness to Clemson in that, and then to penalize Wake Forest with a single point drop. I'm not with it. I think it's a little bit of an injustice that's on there. All right, from here, let's go look at how this stacks up against what I call my resume rankings and see where the AP and the resume are not aligned. Thanks. Okay, then let's look at how this actually stacks up with my ranking system. As a reminder, my ranking system only takes into account the games that they've actually played and the result of those games versus some expectations against the AP Top 25 ranking. For more detail about that, at the end of this presentation, I've got an appendix. It'll go through all the scoring details and things like that if you'd like to dig into it a little bit more. But just looking at some of the highlights on the sheet, you can't help but talk about Kansas State. Right? They just emerged into the top 25, and so I just did a detailed sheet on them, which allowed them to kind of come into the resume rankings. And surprisingly, they came in with a score that was equivalent to Tennessee at the top slot. So looking at that, that basically tells me that Kansas State actually played a pretty decent slate of games to start the season out with, and they're continuing to measure up and kick some butt. I think they proved that against Oklahoma. So the fact that they're ranked with the AP top 20 at 25 in the AP 25, but they've got a 62.5 point score within this ranking system tells me they're going to move up. And the Big 12, I think, better watch out. I think we saw a huge warning shot fired out there. I'd say almost the same thing about Minnesota as we go into Big 10 play. And I guess my eyes a little bit on Florida State as well. All of them getting pretty decent quality rankings within my resume ranking system, but being at the bottom end of the top 25. So we'll see what happens there. The other thing I'm really curious about is Alabama. They started it out with a huge win over Vanderbilt in the SEC. Vanderbilt obviously isn't what I would call the top competition within the SEC. But I will say the next 2-3 weeks, Alabama's resume, assuming they win, is going to go up significantly. They definitely have a few tests that are in the picture here coming up over the next 3 weeks. Looking at the bottom half of my table, I'm really concerned here that we've got so many top 10 teams that are still struggling to barely get out of the 50s, and some are even still in the 40s. And to me, that's poor scheduling, just so much wasted opportunity for what could have been real interconference play and competition. I'll call out Michigan again. This is the second week in a row. They were completely unimpressive in their Big Ten start this week, only scoring a 47.5. It's one of the few times that a winning team can actually get less than 50 in my books in the way that I did it. So, it was just a completely unimpressive win. USC, same thing. Ohio State, I actually feel like they should be doing a little bit better, but when I go look at their actual games, things like that, they're just kind of holding it at that 50. And a lot of that's because Notre Dame fell out of the top 25, so they're not getting any credit now for having beat them as a top 25 team back at the beginning of the year. But still, I mean, it seems to me they ought to be pushing above 50. I'd say the same thing about Oklahoma State, although they had a bye this past week, so there's one less game in their average. Let's see what happens when Big 12 play gets started. Let's call out Utah at 22. I think that's probably about right for them. I definitely think they got a lot more potential. I had tickets to go to Sun Devil Stadium Saturday night, and I got to see them play. I thought they looked really good. And here's a few highlights to show you from that game. I hope you have a good time. I've included in the appendix just how we do the resume rankings. Continue to watch. If not, I'd ask you to subscribe and follow. We'll be out again next week with Week 5's updates. Take it easy. Enjoy college football. How does resume ranking work? Well, quite simply, each team has the ability to earn a certain number of points within the game. The visiting team has a chance to earn up to 100. The home team can earn up to 90. There is a 10-point bias towards the visitors. So where do those points come from? 50 points goes to the winner, straight up. 10 points always goes to the visiting team. If you're playing a top 25 team from ranking 11 to 25, you'll get a 15-point bonus. If you're playing somebody in the top 10, you'll get a 25-point bonus. The remainder of the points are allocated based upon the difference in your ranking between you and your opponent. If you're ranked 2 points above, then you would fall into the upper half of the table in this area here, right? I'm ranked number 7, my opponent's ranked number 9, so I would be in this category. I'm expected to win, but it should be close. And I'll even give credit for meeting the expectation in extremely tight games. However, if you're number 9 playing number 7, then there's a little more, or there's a little less expectation that you will actually win the game. And so I give credit for keeping the game close and moving your way through there. If you're highly favored, then it should be a blowout. If it stays close, you'll be penalized. If you're a major underdog, you should get blown out. And so if you can keep the game close, then we will give you advantage points in that respect as well. So let's look at how this polling works with who our current number 1 is, Georgia. You can see they had a great win against Oregon. Oregon was ranked, and so they got a broad spectrum of points, both from the win-loss column, from Oregon being a ranked opponent, and from blowing them out. Unfortunately, after they blew them out, Oregon was no longer ranked. Week 2, we go back, and that game is now only worth 50 points because they're no longer ranked, and you would expect the number 2 school to blow away an unranked team. But we come into the 3rd week, and we see Oregon had climbed its way back in. I mean, they were just barely out of the ranking. They climbed their way back in, and so we actually reestablish some of those. What we'll do is every week we will reevaluate the table based upon the current rankings. In doing this, Georgia comes in with a total resume ranking of 58.3. Pay attention to a little bit of what's going on here. The team, if your team isn't ranked, or if you're an FCS, right, it's a 50-point game. You don't get any bonus points. That 50 is going to be something we watch for as we go through the other tables throughout this ranking system. All right, so let's look at